guys, it's good to see you. I am back with another how to make your own videos video. We are in the stage of editing and none of you asked me to stop doing these series, so I'm just gonna keep going. This video is going to be about the audio part of editing. So I've told you I record two types of ways. One is at home with the camera and the other one is in the studio. Now I'm going to start off with Pro Tools, talking about how I edit with Pro Tools, and later I'll talk about how I edit with the basic audio files from the camera directly. Because some of the things I use to edit even the camera audio files is from what I know of Pro Tools. So I hope you find this interesting. If you don't have Pro Tools, it is still going to be helpful in the long run to know how to treat your audio the best way possible. So last when I stopped with the audio recording video, I was talking about layering tracks with different takes and different instruments and vocals. So the first thing that I do while editing is choose the best parts and put them together. So that involves mainly the blade tool and the copy paste tool. Again, I'm just giving you an overview of what I do and I hope it'll help you. So that's what I do with vocals. After recording all possible takes that I want and all the creativity is out there, I will edit them by selecting the good parts, putting them together using the move tool and the copy paste tool, and then I go on to the music, which in most of my songs is the guitar, and often these songs have a very repetitive guitar chord progression. With my guitaring, there are some parts of that which is good and some parts which are not as great. So normally what I do is I will select the best part of the guitar that is repeating a lot. I select that, copy that, and I paste it. Here's where the grid really helps. So these lines you see on the screen that divide the screen, that is the grid. There's a slip mode and the grid mode. These are the two modes which I use a lot. When you select the grid mode, you can select audio in a very precise time. So when you select a particular guitar part, for example, if you select according to the grid, when you paste it, it will paste in the exact time that you want depending on that particular metronome, and then you will not have trouble later when you're putting together different instruments and the timings are haywire. So the grid editing really helps you to stay on time while editing. And the other mode which I said is a slip mode. That helps you do more kind of fine tuning, so you can move things around in a more precise way without being on the grid necessarily. The grids are typically 1 bar, so 4 counts, whereas the slip you can go in between those 4 counts. So to crossfade, you've probably seen this in most audio software. You can just go to the edge of that audio track and drag it inwards or outwards, however that you need, and it will show you a fade. If you're fading between two bits of audio, then you crossfade outwards, and the length which you stretch that fade depends on how much you want the fade to be. If there's not much change between the two clips of audio, like the volumes are similar, then you just want to give a very, very tiny fade so that when the audio crosses over, there's a blip sound doesn't come, because that comes if you don't fade in. This takes a lot of time for your ears to know what sound you're really trying to get at the end of all this, and this can take years. Just keep doing it. Right now I'm just giving you the tools so that you can work on this, and as time goes, develop your ear to know what kind of sound that you want to produce, what kind of sound you want to produce. The next thing I edit is the volume. We can increase or reduce the gain, which is also called the volume, to get an even balanced sound. Often when you hear a live recording, there's some parts of that recording which are very low and you have to strain yourself to hear, which is normal. But when you're editing in a software like Pro Tools, you can even out all the sound, keep the dynamics, and yet make it in such a way that the listener is never straining to hear what's happening. That doesn't mean everything is the same loudness or softness. There's just a lot more balancing that you can do. So what I've observed my dad doing, just to give you a guideline of how much to increase or how much to reduce. Typically, if something is not greatly lower or not greatly higher, it is fiddled with by about 3 decibels. 2 to 6, that's the usual range that I've observed. So if I'm starting off singing kind of soft and then in the chorus I'm loud, this is the range that is cut or increased. Often there's no clear-cut rule that you have to do it by these many decibels or you have to do this certain thing. It just depends on what sounds good to your ear. Another thing we edit is the breath sound in a vocal track, or some extra noise in the guitar, like when you're changing your finger position and this extra sound comes from the string. If you're using a condenser mic, it is extremely sensitive, and sometimes it blows certain things out of proportion than how it naturally sounds in a room. So breaths in a vocal track, because I'm a singer, I'm talking a lot about singing, the editing used for singing, the breaths get really loud, much louder than it is when, say, I sing in front of you. My dad, what he does, he wants to keep the breath sound because that's natural, but he will cut it a lot. And usually he decreases the breath sound by about 6 to 10 decibels. So you search for the gain control and go into the -6 or 10 depending on how loud the breath is. An interesting thing he does while editing is he looks at the waveforms a lot. So instead of hearing the whole track and stopping and controlling the breath, he just looks at the waves and edits that volume of the breaths. And he also does this kind of editing for timing, to make sure things are in time and in sync with each other. He looks at the waves and sees if they're starting at the same time where the lines are of the grid, and he can just shift things around without necessarily hearing and going through every single thing. So waveforms you can really use to your advantage if you look at the visual picture in front of you. And again, with practice you'll identify how certain noises have a different shape than the music. So what really I've seen that we spend a lot of time at with editing is if there are a lot of different instruments and vocals and harmonies, is putting all this in sync with each other. What happens when you put different tracks together is they're not perfectly on time, and this is very natural for human playing. One disadvantage of going to the studio and recording is everything has to be so perfect, because the standard of studio tracks that we hear today are so perfect. There's no raw little mistake or slight going off in vocals. You don't hear any of that. It's robotically perfect. So this takes a lot of time to make. Whereas if you're recording using MIDI, you can play not exactly on time, but the MIDI will sort out things perfectly on time for you, which is really helpful, but it doesn't sound the same. Yeah, it really depends on what sound you want. Okay, so there's a lot more you can do with editing on Pro Tools, but this is the basic editing that I do. And by now I have a raw but a kind of done audio track. Now we come to what really makes these tracks stand out from other tracks. What makes the studio track stand out from, say, a camera recorded track, and that is the effects.